Imagine this. One careless sentence thrown across a courtroom suddenly reveals years of quiet, invisible privilege. The morning session had only just begun, and the municipal courtroom carried its familiar scent of polished wood and old varnish. Benches creaked as people shifted, waiting for their turn. A low murmur hovered in the air, small talk, rustling jackets, the occasional cough reverberating off brick walls softened by decades. Then the door handle clicked. Everyone turned. She entered like someone walking into a cafe she owned. Sleek beige coat, tailored pants, sunglasses still on despite the fluorescent lighting. Her heels tapped briskly on the floor, the rhythm bordering on impatient. Without glancing at the judge, she scanned her notifications, thumb scrolling at the pace of someone who believed time obeyed her. A few whispers rose in the back row. That's the Carrington girl. From the Tower Project? Yep, the billionaire's daughter. Judge Caprio lifted his gaze, calm, attentive, carrying the weight of someone who had seen every kind of attitude pass before him. But even he paused for half a beat. Her name appeared next on the docket, a simple parking case. 3 unpaid tickets. Technically minor. But the notes in the margin were odd. Fees reduced, warnings bypassed, mailed notices marked as forwarded by request. Little red flags sprinkled across the page like confetti. She didn't wait to be addressed. "Let's get this over with," she said, still staring at her phone. "You're lucky I even came." A wave of tension rolled through the room. Several people straightened in their seats. One man muttered, "Well, isn't she charming?" Caprio closed the folder with deliberate calm. "Miss," he said gently, "please step forward." She didn't hurry. She moved in slow, measured steps, the pace of someone accustomed to curated environments. Lounges, boardrooms, private terminals, not a municipal courtroom with scuffed floors and humming lights. Her violation was basic, unpaid fines for repeatedly blocking a restricted zone. But something in the official notes felt off. Too many adjustments. Too many unexplained overrides. Caprio asked her name for the record. She didn't even look up. "Can't you just talk to my assistant? She handles everything." A soft groan passed through the audience. Someone chuckled in disbelief. Another whispered, "Oh boy." Caprio's tone shifted, not angry, not sharp, but firmer, cooler, carrying that unmistakable authority only fairness can give. "In this courtroom," he replied, "I speak to people, not to their assistants." Her sunglasses finally lowered. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a practiced indifference. Yet the room felt it, an invisible crack in her composure. Caprio reopened the file, flipping to a document tucked beneath the others. His brow rose, just slightly. Whatever he saw wasn't routine. It wasn't even close. And suddenly it was clear. This wasn't a parking case. This was the first loose thread of something much larger, something that had been quietly hidden for a long time. The room leaned in without moving a muscle. Caprio cleared his throat. "Miss Carrington, we need to talk." "Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel." Caprio adjusted his glasses, studying her face for a long, steady moment. He didn't need to raise his voice. The silence did all the work. "Miss Carrington," he said softly, "tell me a little about yourself." She exhaled, the kind of sigh usually reserved for airport delays. "My life is complicated. I travel constantly. I don't deal with tickets." The words weren't hostile, merely detached, as though she were repeating a line she'd learned long ago. Someone else handles problems. Her tone suggested she believed the court should already know this, should treat it as reasonable. But something in her delivery, an almost imperceptible tremor, hinted there was more beneath the polished shell. Caprio leaned forward slightly. "Complicated doesn't explain 3 ignored notices." She blinked, irritated, as if he'd interrupted an important meeting. "I have a schedule. I fly between cities. Things slip through. But someone must receive your mail." She hesitated. A small hesitation, but one that told a story. "My father's office does," she finally said. They sorted. Whispers stirred again. The Carrington name carried weight in Providence. Skyscrapers, redevelopment fights, headlines about evictions replaced by shimmering renderings of luxury towers. People in the room weren't merely curious now, they remembered. Near the back row, an older woman nudged her husband. "That's the girl," she whispered. "Her father bought the block where the Walshes lived." Her husband nodded grimly. Condos went up 6 months later. The murmurs crept forward like a tide. Miss Carrington heard them. She stiffened, folding her arms, the phone finally forgotten. Caprio noticed everything. "What do you do for work?" he asked. She shrugged. "I manage things for my family." "A job title?" She stared at him, unsure whether it was a trick question or simply a world she had never been asked to explain. "I help oversee events. Projects. I travel." It was a textbook answer of someone whose responsibilities existed mostly on paper. But for the first time, she looked uncomfortable saying it aloud. Caprio's voice softened. "Do you live here in Providence full-time?" Another pause. "No. I split time between here and Boston. And sometimes Europe." "Who told you today's hearing was optional?" She swallowed, barely noticeable, but the room caught it. "My father's counsel. They said these things usually work themselves out." Caprio closed her file with a quiet click. "Miss Carrington, problems don't work themselves out. People do." Her gaze flickered upward. Something in the judge's tone, gentle but immovable, reached a part of her no assistant had ever spoken to. He continued, "Growing up, did you have much experience dealing with things yourself?" She clenched her jaw. It was the first genuine emotion she'd shown. "My father always handled everything. Decisions, conflicts, bills, all of it. He likes things controlled." The room absorbed that word controlled. Caprio folded his hands. "That sounds like a heavy way to live." For a heartbeat, she almost answered with sincerity. Almost. But then the mask snapped back into place. "I'm fine. I just want this finished." But the trembling edge in her voice betrayed her. The judge tapped the folder lightly. "Miss Carrington, what I see in these pages isn't a criminal. It's someone who's never been allowed to stand on her own feet." Her eyes widened, unexpectedly vulnerable, just as he added, "And someone who doesn't yet understand how many people her choices affect." The courtroom went still. A shift had begun, not dramatic, not loud, but unmistakable. For the first time, the young woman looked as though she might actually listen. The quiet in the courtroom felt different now, no longer irritation, but a collective leaning in, as if everyone sensed the ground beneath this case was shifting. Caprio reopened the folder, scanned a page, then turned to the parking officer seated near the front. "Officer Mendez," he said, "you issued 2 of the citations. Is there something here that concerns you?" The officer stood, clearing his throat. "Yes, Your Honor. Something's off about the reductions." "Reductions?" Caprio asked. Mendez nodded. "These weren't normal adjustments. The fines were cut down before they even hit our system. I didn't authorize it, and neither did my supervisor." A stir rippled through the room. A few people exchanged knowing looks. This was Providence, after all. Miss Carrington's shoulders tightened. "That has nothing to do with me. I don't manage administrative errors." Mendez continued, "But that wasn't the only thing. Each time her car was cited, it was parked in the same handicapped spot behind Tremont Clinic." A sharp gasp came from somewhere in the back. Caprio's brow lowered just a fraction. "Miss Carrington, did you know that was a reserved space?" She threw up her hands. "I didn't memorize the whole parking lot. My assistant drops the car wherever there's room." "But the vehicle was registered under your name," the judge replied. "I told you, someone handles that." The defensiveness came out too fast, veering dangerously close to desperation. Caprio didn't push. He simply waited. Silence edged wider across the room until a faint voice called from the left aisle. "I can confirm the space," the voice said. "It's mine." All eyes turned to an older man rising slowly from a bench, gripping a pair of polished wooden crutches. His jacket hung a little loose, his movements careful, deliberate. When he reached the aisle, the courtroom seemed to shrink around him. Caprio motioned gently. "Sir, take your time." The veteran, his hair silver, his face weathered by more than age, stopped a few feet from the bench. "My name's Frank Leary," he said quietly. "I come to Tremont twice a week for therapy." Miss Carrington froze. He continued, "Every time I came in, that spot was taken, the one with my number on it." He wasn't angry. That made it worse. His voice carried the heaviness of someone long used to being pushed aside. "I thought maybe the city changed the rules. Or maybe someone important needed it more than I did." He glanced at her. No accusation, just honest bewilderment. "I used to sit in my car and wait for 15 minutes until a nurse brought out a wheelchair. Couldn't walk the distance otherwise." The room held its breath. For a moment, Miss Carrington looked like she couldn't understand what he was saying, because understanding it would mean seeing herself clearly. But then something, maybe the slow tremor in his hands, maybe her own reflection in so many watching faces, pierced the shell. Her voice wavered. I didn't know. The veteran nodded, not unkindly. Most folks don't until it's their legs that stop listening. Caprio's expression changed in a way only longtime viewers of his courtroom would recognize. A quiet gravity, a moral boundary crossed. Miss Carrington, he said softly, papers tell one story. People tell another. A weight settled over the room as though everyone understood. They hadn't reached the heart of the matter yet, but they were close. The veteran's last words were still hanging in the air when Caprio leaned back, studying the young woman as if seeing her for the first time. His tone remained gentle, but something firmer entered its foundation, a quiet insistence. Miss Carrington, he asked, were you aware that your repeated parking affected this gentleman's access to medical care? For the first time since she walked in, she didn't fire back. She didn't sigh, didn't smirk, didn't lift her chin. She simply froze. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse, knuckles paling. She glanced at the veteran, then at the judge, then down at the table, as if searching for an answer that didn't exist. Finally she whispered, I didn't even know the car was being used at those times. The room didn't believe her, not yet. A few scoffs, a muffled yeah right. But Caprio caught something the crowd didn't. The sentence hadn't been polished by privilege. It came out raw, unguarded. He narrowed his eyes slightly. If not you, then who? She swallowed. My father, she said. He uses the car whenever he wants. Or tells staff to. He always says. VIPs don't hunt for parking. Gasps rolled through the benches. Even the clerk paused mid-motion. Her face shifted, pride, shame, confusion twisting together. This wasn't a calculated confession. It slipped out because she was finally speaking without armor. Caprio spoke softly. Did you realize that implicating him changes the entire nature of this case? She shook her head, a small, frightened movement. I didn't think. I just... Before she could finish, the veteran raised one hand. His voice, though quiet, carried enough weight to still the room. Your father, he said, is the same man who pressured me to testify against my neighbor. Years ago, he wanted that land for his development. The ripple through the courtroom was immediate. Shock, anger, a kind of sorrow only people who've lived long enough to recognize patterns can feel. A woman in the back muttered, of course it was him. Miss Carrington's breath caught in her throat. You could see it, the moment a lifetime of rationalizations cracked. Her father's rules, his shortcuts, the favors, the influence, she had never questioned the cost. Not until now. She looked at the veteran again. His gaze wasn't cruel. It was weary. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know any of this. And for once, everyone believed her, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Her voice had lost its practiced certainty. She sounded like someone realizing her life had been built from rooms she never had permission to enter. Caprio let the silence hold. He wasn't rushing to fill it. He wanted her to feel its weight. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady. We're no longer talking about parking tickets, Mississippi. We're talking about accountability. Her shoulders fell, not in defeat, but in understanding. The courtroom seemed to exhale with her. This was the moment the story turned, not because she was exposed, but because she was finally beginning to see. The courtroom had shifted. What began as irritation toward an entitled young woman was now a different current. Heavy, expectant, almost protective. Caprio sensed it and motioned for the clerk to bring forward an extended report. A thin stack of papers landed on his bench with a soft thud that sounded louder than it should have. He scanned the first page. His eyebrows lifted, barely, but enough for the room to stiffen. Miss Carrington, he said quietly, I requested the full administrative trail behind your citations. She straightened, bracing herself. What I see here is troubling. He read aloud, not with theatrics, but with the calm precision of someone laying out a puzzle. Each time your vehicle was cited, the fine was reduced. Not once, not twice, every single time. A murmur swelled across the benches. This wasn't corruption, it was worse in some ways. Silent, automatic privilege baked into a system never designed to be tested by people who assumed it belonged to them. Caprio continued, The reductions trace back to a corporate account associated with your father's development firm. That account was flagged 6 years ago for special processing. He looked up. Did you know about that? She shook her head. I honestly didn't. I thought assistants handled everything. The words sounded smaller now. She wasn't defending herself. She was beginning to understand what everything actually meant. Caprio turned to the officer. There's also mention of a medical delay incident. Can you elaborate? The officer nodded solemnly. Yes, Your Honor. Last year, a veteran, same gentleman here, arrived late to his hypertension treatment. His usual spot was occupied. He had to circle the lot twice. His blood pressure spiked. The veteran, still standing with the help of his cane, exhaled sharply at the memory. And according to the records, the officer added, that car was yours. The room darkened emotionally. People leaned forward, the way older Americans do when something hits close to home. Medical emergencies, lost time, the fragile line between routine and catastrophe. Miss Carrington pressed a hand to her mouth. I didn't know, she murmured. Nobody ever told me. I never meant to hurt anyone. Her voice wasn't polished or poised. It was young, human. Someone raised inside a bubble so thick she never realized others were bruised by it. The veteran looked at her with an expression that softened the entire room. I don't want her punished, he said. I want her to understand. The simplicity of it landed harder than any accusation. Caprio closed the folders gently, fingers resting on the paper for a moment as though feeling the weight of everything unsaid. Miss Carrington, he said, you were handed a life where consequences were optional. But today isn't about your father's reach. It's about whether you are willing to step out of his shadow. Her eyes glistened, just a flicker, but she didn't hide it. The courtroom was silent, not with judgment, but with a collective awareness that something important was finally taking shape. Caprio leaned forward, voice even. I see the whole picture now, and the real question is whether you're ready to see it with me. This time, she nodded. Not out of obedience, out of awakening. The courtroom held its breath. Caprio rested his palms on the bench, studying the young woman in front of him. Not the heiress, not the headline waiting to happen, but the person finally stripped of insulation. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but carried through the room like a struck bell. Miss Carrington, justice isn't about punishment. It's about responsibility. She didn't blink. She looked ready, frightened, but ready. Caprio continued. You've lived in a world where others paid your debts, absorbed your mistakes, curated your reality. But privilege doesn't erase impact. It magnifies it. A few people in the audience nodded, particularly the older ones who had seen too much of the world to be impressed by money. He tapped the file once. I could fine you thousands. I could refer this for further action. But that wouldn't teach you what this gentleman, he nodded to the veteran, has shown here today. That empathy is stronger than any penalty. A long pause. It felt like the room leaned in. So here is my ruling. She straightened. Your monetary fines are reduced to their base amounts. You will pay them in full. But that is the smallest part of this decision. Her breath caught. You will complete 60 hours of volunteer service at the medical clinic this veteran attends, specifically assisting the mobility and intake team. You will see firsthand what 3 lost minutes can mean. A ripple of stunned reaction moved through the benches. Not outrage, approval. Older listeners in the room murmured, that's right, and that'll teach her better than any fine. Caprio wasn't finished. You will also deliver a written acknowledgement to the clinic staff and to this veteran, not an apology drafted by attorneys, but a reflection on what you learned. I expect sincerity, not strategy. She swallowed hard, then whispered, I'll do it. All of it. The veteran shifted his cane and turned toward her. She hesitated, then approached him slowly, as though stepping into a life she hadn't known existed. If you have an appointment this week, she said quietly, I can take you. If you want. It wasn't performance. It was the first real gesture she'd made all day. The veteran's brows lifted, then softened into something like acceptance. I'd appreciate that, he said. The audience felt it, a tiny fracture in a generational cycle of entitlement and resentment. Caprio looked at her one last time, but his words were meant for everyone. Remember this, the law isn't here to humiliate you. It's here to remind us that we belong to one another. And when we forget that, someone always gets hurt. Silence settled, but it was warm now, not sharp. The kind of silence that holds a lesson. As court adjourned, Miss Carrington didn't reach for her phone. She stepped aside, letting the veteran walk first, matching her pace to his. The people in the room watched her go, different, not redeemed, but changed in a way that matters. Justice had done what it was meant to do. Not break her, but wake her.